Hi, Arcfield Meteorologist. Paul Dorian here on Thursday morning, July the 24th. A lot to talk about this morning. We'll focus in on the tropical scene across the northern hemisphere. It's been relatively quiet throughout most of the basins, the Atlantic Basin, the Pacific Basin, Indian Ocean also quiet in terms of tropical activity so far. Still relatively early. The peak of the Atlantic Basin tropical season typically comes around the middle part of September or so. There are reasons to believe that activity will ramp up significantly in the Atlantic Basin during the month of August, and we'll get into those in a moment or two. In the meantime, we have some high heat and humidity ready to push back into the mid-Atlantic, northeast U.S. for the day on Friday. High temperatures on Friday afternoon, mid to upper 90s in that D.C., Philadelphia, New York City corridor. Really, that high heat and humidity will extend all the way up to Boston as well. Now, the weekend and the first half of next week also look quite hot and humid, and it will be unsettled with the threat of showers and thunderstorms from time to time. However, by the end of next week and going into the following week, which would be the first week of the month of August, it looks like pleasant air mass could extend all the way from the northeastern part of the nation into the Midwest and maybe even into the Central Plains. Again, that's at the end of July, that first week of August. It is at that point in time, that first week of August, where we may start to see a ramp up in some tropical activity in the Atlantic Basin. Let's start off here with the latest accumulated cyclone energy. We showed this table yesterday. Of course, not much has changed in the overnight hours, but you just kind of wanted to re-emphasize the quiet nature of the tropical season so far here. First of all, this far right column here on this table presented by Colorado State University shows the accumulated cyclone energy, which is a great measure for tropical activity since it factors in longevity of tropical cyclones in addition to the magnitude. So a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane that lasts for several weeks, for example, would of course have a tremendous impact on the overall ACE. The climatological ACE for this stage of the season, this is up until the 24th of July, is listed here in the parentheses in this far right column, and the current actual ACE numbers right next to it. So you can see the North Atlantic far below normal for this time of year. Again, quite early in the Atlantic Basin tropical season, but even the Pacific Ocean quite a bit below normal. It's such a big ocean that it's split into two sectors, the Northeast or the Eastern Pacific and the Western Pacific. The Western Pacific has been very quiet here, maybe a third of what is normal in terms of activity. No activity so far. That means no named tropical system so far in the Indian Ocean here. In the Northern Hemisphere as a whole, well below normal for this time of the year. Again, relatively early as far as the Atlantic Basin is concerned for sure, but we'll see if this trend continues. I do believe activity will start to ramp up significantly during the month of August in the Atlantic Basin. Now let's take a look at the latest sea surface temperature anomalies around the world, and of course this is playing an important role in this case in the suppression of the activity in the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. We have the equator right in this area right here, and we have the blue areas represent below normal water temperatures. In other words, the Pacific Ocean here, the tropical Pacific Ocean, the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean is largely at or below normal temperature-wise here in terms of the sea surface temperatures right here showing up in blue. It looks like this kind of a pattern here with a weak La Nina may continue not only through the fall season but potentially into the winter as well. So this may be a factor to look at here, either neutral or maybe a weak La Nina going all the way into the winter season of 2025-2026. And we'll certainly monitor that over the next few months and see what kind of an impact that could have on the upcoming winter season. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic Ocean, also around the equator, below normal temperatures showing up in blue here. This is the west coast of Africa. A lot of normal to below normal right here across that main development region of the Atlantic Ocean. So these are contributing factors right now to let's call it the suppression of activity, at least up to this point in the 2025 tropical season. Well, here's another way to look at those sea surface temperature anomalies. This is from tropicaltidbits.com. It is showing the entire tropical region around the globe here in terms of temperatures, water temperatures relative to normal. You can see going all the way back to late May, temperatures have been running at below normal levels. Again, in that main development region of the tropics here. This is including the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, right around the tropical area, the equator, 10 degrees north to 10 degrees south. There was kind of a run-up here over the last few weeks in temperatures from well below normal to just slightly below normal, but in the last few days here, it's kind of turned back down again here. So this, again, is one of the reasons why we have a quiet season so far in terms of tropical activity all around the northern hemisphere, below normal water temperatures, and it looks like it's going back in that direction again. We'll see over the next few weeks if things change, but the main development region in the equatorial part showing below normal water temperatures. Now, we've kind of focused on where we've been so far with respect to tropical activity around the northern hemisphere. Let's kind of take a look ahead to where we may be going. This is the Madden-Julian Oscillation, MJO, as depicted by the European model going forward into that first week of August. Now, I've shown these plots before. The way to view these is that the MJO, which basically traps a tropical disturbance that propagates on a regular basis across the tropical region of the globe here. And depending on its location, it can have an impact on the Atlantic Basin, for example, or the eastern U.S. And depending on that location, or what we call a phase, it can give some kind of a signal as to where the pattern may be headed. In this particular case, we see the phase number up in the upper part of each of these triangular quadrants here. Phase 7, Phase 8, Phase 1, Phase 2. Again, those represent different locations around the world with respect to that tropical disturbance, that complex of thunderstorms. This particular plot presents the MJO movement in a counterclockwise fashion, and it extends from the current date all the way out to August 7th. It is moving this way, so it moves through Phase 7 and then into Phase 8 and into Phase 1. Now you can kind of see an inner circle right here. The closer into that inner circle, the weaker the signal comes from the MJO. In other words, the closer into the center of this center circle, the weaker the signal, the less the impact of MJO. However, having said that, it does move to what we historically have found to be more active phases or locations this time of the year for tropical activity in the Atlantic Basin. In other words, the movement into Phase 8 at the end of July going into early August and then into Phase 1, albeit in a weakened state here, indicates we may have that uptick in activity. And of course, from a climatological point of view, August generally sees an uptick in activity as well. Now, this is the depiction of the European model. I have another model right here that actually comes from the Australian Meteorological Service here. This is the same MJO, but depicted by the Australian model, and it has a similar path through Phase 7 into Phase 8, and then ultimately into Phase 1 as we get into the end of July, early August. But notice how much farther out of this inner circle this prediction is by this Australian model. In other words, the MJO on this particular model forecast goes through the same phases as the European model, those more active phases, but in a much stronger state. So certainly if this were to become the truth here, this would really raise a red flag that activity can build in the Atlantic Basin during the month of August. So the combination of these models here, the movement of that MJO, suggests to me that indeed activity will ramp up in August in the Atlantic Basin. And we'll take a look at another factor that I like to look at this time of the year, and that is high pressure ridging that becomes centered over the southeastern part of Canada. That also is a red flag, and indeed that is on the table. Well, again, continuing on that tropical theme here for this video discussion so far, I wanted to show this particular map that was posted by Joe Bastardi, meteorologist Joe Bastardi, Weather Bell Analytics. It is the European model in terms of the upper level divergence. And upper level divergence is shown on this kind of a map here in green. And whenever you have upper level divergence, you usually have convergence in the lower part of the atmosphere. So these areas that show upper level divergence generally would be areas of activity in the tropics that will be increasing because of that convergence down in the lower levels of the atmosphere. You can see it's basically in the Atlantic basin during this time period. This is August 3rd all the way out to August 8th. So this is kind of another signal of the movement of the MJO that may lead to upward motion in the Atlantic basin during that first or especially second and third weeks of the month of August. So just yet another map kind of confirming the signal from that MJO, that upward motion or convergence in the lower part of the atmosphere will increase in the tropical Atlantic going through the month of August. Now, one last plot I'd like to show before we get to the continental U.S. forecast maps from the 0Z run of the GFS. This is a compilation of model forecasts for specifically the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean, what we call the ENSO, the El Nino or La Nina, out in the all-important central part of the Pacific Ocean. Going forward on kind of a rolling 3-month average here, you can see down here, for example, this is the December, January, February forecast from a whole series of maps. Now, the thick red line here represents the average of what we call dynamical models. These are models that continue to get updated by current observations, and we have statistical models here that run more on statistics, climatology, and the average of those statistical models shown in this thick green line. This line right here at the 0 number here represents neutral conditions going forward. Everything above it, El Nino. Everything below it, La Nina. In other words, everything above it, warmer than normal sea surface temperatures out across the tropical Pacific. Anything below that 0 line, colder than normal in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. We showed up front sea surface temperature anomalies right now. We indeed have slightly colder than normal conditions in the tropical Pacific. Well, going forward here, both the dynamical and the statistical models tend to have a similar forecast, either neutral or a very weak La Nina going through the fall season into the winter. Pretty much anything within these dashed lines here at plus or minus 0.5 represent neutral signal here. So pretty much it's consistent here with all kinds of models that this neutral or weak La Nina will continue right through the tropical season and into the upcoming winter season. Again, December, January, February, March, February, March, April. This is the winter right in this area right here. So we'll see if this pattern holds up and what kind of an impact it could have on the upcoming winter season. Now let's get back to the continental U.S. This is the 0Z run of the GFS. We're looking at 850 millibar temperature anomalies. Basically, we have a hot stretch here for much of the eastern part of the nation, beginning especially on Friday. In fact, Friday might be the peak of this next hot spell here for the I-95 corridor region, for example. High temperatures tomorrow afternoon could be in the upper 90s in D.C., but again, that intense heat may be kind of a one-day event, then more conventional heat and humidity Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But a big temperature change, a big pattern change may evolve by the end of next week. August 1st is next Friday. Right around that time frame, maybe a day or two before that, the pattern will change, and we'll note that here in a moment here. Watch what happens here. We have this above normal conditions temperature-wise. Really, again, peaks on Friday with the well up in the 90s from D.C. to New York City all the way to Boston here. Very, very hot and humid day. And there will be some late day and evening showers and thunderstorms, some of which can be strong to severe. Then we move forward here. It stays quite warm right through the weekend and humid throughout much of the eastern half of the nation still. California, where, by the way, it's been a very cold summer season so far. I saw yesterday, I think San Francisco is experiencing its coldest summer since 1982. That's pretty impressive. And again, we've had these series of colder than normal air masses pushing in from the eastern Pacific Ocean into the western states. And that will be very interesting if that kind of a pattern continues through the fall and into the upcoming winter season here. But we go into the end of the upcoming weekend and then into the first half of next week. Very warm conditions, well above normal throughout the eastern half of the nation. Still some colder than normal air hanging on across California here. Tuesday, and then into the middle part of next week. This is now Wednesday of next week. But at this point in time, take a look to the northwest here. You have a large area of colder than normal conditions here. We talked about, I always like to take a look at what's going on over the Hudson Bay, over Greenland, over even the Great Lakes this time of the year, and going over the next couple of months to see if we can start that ice buildup in those water areas like the Hudson Bay of Canada and the Great Lakes here. And colder than normal conditions showing up on the map here by the middle of next week, and you'll see that slowly slides to the south and east. This is the last day of the month of July, a week from right now, next Thursday, the 31st, and it looks like going into the first of the month of August here, very pleasant air mass extending all the way from the central and northern plains across the Midwest Great Lakes into the northeast U.S. This won't be permanent, but it looks like that about a week time period from the latter part of next week, probably into the latter part of the following week. Pleasant conditions throughout much of the eastern half of the nation. Now, let's take a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps going forward. We have a strong ridge right now over the northeastern part of the nation. Heat and humidity start to build up today. Not really all that bad, but then on Friday, that heat may reach a peak in much of the northeastern part of the nation with kind of one-day intense heat experienced in the Mid-Atlantic, in the northeast U.S. We'll move forward here in time, and slowly but surely this ridge will end up shifting to the west here as we go forward in time here. Not this weekend, later next week is when the shift starts to take place. And here we go by Monday. Notice here kind of focus the center of this upper level ridge over the Tennessee Valley, and it will be hot down in the deep south, down over the Tennessee Valley early next week, and up across the southern central plains area as well. Really very warm and humid across the Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast U.S. Here we now go into Tuesday and then Wednesday of next week, and we start to see that upper level trough showing up here across southeastern Canada. That is the main player that could bring kind of a pleasant air mass to the northeast, to the Mid-Atlantic region as we begin the month of August, and we'll move forward in time here. Here we go, a week from right now, a deep upper level trough centered over the southeastern part of Canada, extending southwestward into New England. And that ridge, which was kind of parked over the northeast U.S. today, a week from right now, is centered over the south central states. And again, they're headed for a hot spell across Tennessee Valley, the deep south, all the way up across the plains here, going forward through next week. And there is relief in sight for sure across the northeastern part of the nation by the latter part of next week. Now, I just want to go a little bit farther out in time. Here we are on Saturday, August the 2nd, and watch what starts to happen here with that ridge up here across Canada as we get all the way out. Now, we're all the way out past 10 days out here into that first week of August. And here we have very strong high pressure ridging starting to build, intensify over the southeastern part of Canada. That, to me, this time of year always kind of sends a red flag, something to look out for. This is all the way out there in speculation phase time period here, but nonetheless, it kind of makes sense with the evolving pattern here as we go through August that we'll see high pressure ridging way up here over eastern Canada, and oftentimes you can get tropical systems undercutting that ridge with systems moving from the east to the west towards the southwestern Atlantic, the Bahamas, the Gulf region, even the Caribbean Sea. This is something we'll watch for over the next week to 10 days or so. Now, finally, let's wrap up with the surface forecast ramps. And I mentioned earlier this week that this kind of evolving pattern that we'll see that ridge in the upper part of the atmosphere shift into the middle part of the nation will result in northwest flow aloft from, let's say, the northern plains across the Great Lakes into the northeastern part of the nation. And that kind of a pattern oftentimes features some complexes of thunderstorms, what I call mesoscale convective systems. When I was going to school, they were referred to as MCSs, mesoscale convective systems, that will move, in this case, from northwest to southeast. And kind of a pattern with that ridge over the center part of the nation, northwest flow over the northeastern part of the nation, where you can get these complexes of thunderstorms. That is in the cards, I think, for next week, maybe the first half of next week. And we'll move forward in time here. First of all, surface high pressure this morning, Thursday morning. Now, off the eastern seaboard, on the back side, you have that clockwise flow around the highs, so you have this southwesterly flow of air pumping in that heat and humidity from the south central states all the way up to the Great Lakes, and it really becomes felt in the northeastern states on Friday. Right here we have a hot, humid day for sure on Friday. D.C., Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York City, all the way up to Boston with the 90s commonplace for afternoon highs, well up in the 90s. Now, there will be a cold front starting the day here at this position on Friday morning that pushes slowly to the south and east. I do expect some showers and thunderstorms to develop tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow night for the Mid-Atlantic, for the Northeast U.S. Not everybody will get hit, but some of these storms can reach strong to severe levels. Now, that front then kind of sags right here. You see Saturday morning, it's right in this area right here, that frontal system. You kind of see the kink in the isobar pattern right here. That's the stalling out frontal system that will keep it unsettled in the Mid-Atlantic region on Saturday and Sunday to go along with those very warm and humid conditions. Now, we get into the middle of the weekend, and here is already starting to see maybe these complexes of thunderstorms forming on the northern side of this ridge, the upper level ridge that is shifting westward in this time period. We'll go forward here in time, and here we are on Sunday. Again, unsettled in the northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. And here's another complex of thunderstorms, maybe by Sunday night time frame. Again, it'll be northwest flow, so these will tend to move from northwest to southeast. Here is that complex of thunderstorms early Monday morning. Now, it's quite hard this far out to pinpoint exactly where and when these complexes will develop. I'm just pointing out that this pattern leads to the possibility of complexes of thunderstorms, so we'll have to monitor this closely over the next several days. Here we go into Monday night and Tuesday, another one and another one. Right here, again, that upper level ridge parked over this part of the nation by this time. This is next Tuesday, and on the northern side of that upper level ridge is where you would look for these northwest to southeast movement of the mesoscale convective complexes. Then we get into the middle part of next week, and this Canadian high, this beautiful Canadian high, shows up over the south central part of Canada, and that will build it to the east here by Thursday of next week. A very, very pleasant air mass moves into the northern plains, the Great Lakes, the northeast U.S., and it looks like that will continue to drop to the south and east. And by the time we get to a week from tomorrow, the beginning of August, next Friday, well, very pleasant air all the way from the northern plains across the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Mid-Atlantic, northeast U.S. Now, again, this won't be a permanent change. It looks like, but maybe several days, maybe a full week from later next week to later the following week. Rather decent temperatures in a large part of the eastern U.S. So that's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.